Some breaking news in the past hour. Police say an asylum seeker jailed for sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl and a woman in the UK and released from prison by accident has been spotted in London. Essex police have urged anyone who sees Hadush Kebatu to call 999 immediately. Kebatu's arrest led to protests in Epping, the town where the assaults took place, and to calls for the hotel that he and other asylum seekers were staying in to be closed down. The Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy was highly critical of the error that saw the offender released.
Well, I'm appalled and livid on behalf of the public that Kebatu is at large. He should be deported back to Ethiopia after the sexual assaults that he's committed. And of course, there is now a manhunt with Essex Police, the Metropolitan Police and British Transport Police looking for him. We know that he boarded a train and is at large in London. And of course, I've asked for a full investigation into what's happened, and an officer has been suspended.
UK Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy there. Well, Danny Shaw is a policing and crime commentator who acted as an advisor to Labour's then Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper in the lead-up to the last election. He told BBC Breakfast's Charlie State that he was confident the released prisoner would quickly be recaptured.
Well, firstly, I think it beggars belief that this prisoner was released in error. Of all the prisoners who were going to be looked after and all the arrangements made for them to ensure that they did their time appropriately and that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, you would have thought Hadush Kebatu would be top of that list, given the history of that offender and the debate around asylum hotels and all the controversy that caused. So it's a terrible mistake. It appears as though it's an operational mistake by a prison officer or others in Chelmsford Prison. But clearly someone has taken their eye off the ball there, and an investigation has got to get to the bottom of that. However, I've got confidence in the police that they will locate Hadush Kebatu. The police generally, when they're focused on finding a particular individual, they can bring to bear all their resources to do that. And usually in these cases, the person is found within 24 or 48 hours. He will only have around £76 to spend. That's the discharge grant that prisoners are given. Some of that money has gone on a train fare from Chelmsford to London. Some of it it looks as though it's gone on food because he was spotted carrying a bag with some food, I think, in that footage. So the money will run out pretty quickly, and I expect he will be found.
Yes, you'll have seen, Danny, those images you're referring to, those pictures assumed to be the man who's on the run and carrying a bag, as you say. When you saw those pictures, what were your thoughts?
Well, I mean, he looks slightly bewildered, and I imagine that he was expecting to go to an immigration centre where he was going to be deported back to Ethiopia, and suddenly he's given, his belongings back, £76 in cash, and told you're free to go. So perhaps he doesn't quite understand why that's happened. None of us really understand how that's happened. But nevertheless, he's got on a train to London. Perhaps he has friends or family or some connections in London. And I think what the police will be doing is trying to find out if he does have people there. They'll be trying to find out if that's where he's gone. They'll be looking at phone numbers that he was calling from prison, because they will have those numbers to see whether those numbers have been called by him. And if so, try and trace those calls back to try and locate him. They'll also be scouring CCTV from the train station and then working forwards to see where he's gone after arriving at Liverpool Street, presuming that that's where he ended up. So I expect that they will find him. He also is quite distinctive looking. His clothes are pretty distinctive. So, alerting the public is something else that will help in the manhunt.
Danny Shaw there. Well, before being arrested, the offender was housed in the Bell Hotel in Epping. The local MP, Conservative Neil Hudson, told the Today programme on BBC Radio 4 that the government was ultimately responsible for the mistaken release.
And we've seen, as you've heard on your programme, the mistaken release of prisoners has more than doubled in the last year. And this sounds like an operational error, but the buck has to stop somewhere, and it has to stop at the top, at the Justice Secretary, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. And they have said that they are livid and appalled. Well, quite right, they should be livid and appalled, but that's not good enough. And the Labour government needs to get a grip of this issue. They need to apprehend this man, but they've got to sort this issue out. And that's what my constituents who are deeply distressed and upset are saying.
We heard from our correspondent earlier that there was a new protest outside the hotel last night as a result of this.
Absolutely, yes. We saw another flash protest last night, and I think we must remember this issue hasn't gone away for our community in Epping. Although it's leading the news stories today, this has not gone away. We've had twice weekly protests in the town for weeks and weeks and weeks, and as you have said. Earlier in the summer, some of these protests became violent, and we've seen, people injured. We've seen 8 police officers injured. So this is something that we don't want to see rising up again. And no one in our community wants to see your hometown leading the news day in, day out. And it's leading the news today. But I just must, remind people this has not gone away for the people of Epping. This has been there, and now this has brought it back to the surface. And people are deeply, deeply distressed.
I know, as you said, that the key thing that needs to happen now is that this man needs to be caught again. But in terms of repercussions, the Lib Dem MP for Chelmsford, for example, Marie Goldman, says she's thinking about the idea, should there be a call for the governor of HMP Chelmsford, the prison that he was in, that he should have been picked up from and taken to the detention centre, for them to resign? What do you think should happen in terms of accountability?
I think, as I've said, accountability must go right to the top in terms of the ultimate responsibility for the justice system is the Justice Secretary, and above the Justice Secretary is the Prime Minister. And as I've said, they have said their emotions today. They sound like they are commentating on the situation. And what needs to happen is accountability. We need to find out in Parliament exactly what has gone. There's obviously been an operational error. But accountability in government stops at the top. And this Labour government is presiding over an immigration crisis and also a crisis in the prison system. And really what needs to be done, we've got to apprehend this man. And the government must throw everything at helping Essex police to find this man. And I thank the police for what they're doing, because if we think about the protests through the summer, they've had to police in incredibly difficult situations. As I've said, police officers have been injured in the protests. This is through no fault of their own that this prisoner was released, but they need to get a grip and find this man. But very importantly, they need to get a grip on the immigration issue. But for my town of Epping, they've got to act quickly, and we've got to get this hotel closed.
That's Neil Hudson, the MP for Epping.